Okay, it's about 7:05, so we will get started. Thank you everyone for being here. There are 69 participants on here, so as you could imagine, with everyone's even subtle background noises, it would be chaotic to have everyone be unmuted. So we are asking that you stay muted for the duration of this meeting. If for some reason we need to hear your voice, then we will unmute you or ask you to do that. But on the whole, you'll probably stay muted unless you're one of the people speaking. Thank you for all of you who submitted questions. We got quite a few questions. I believe that most of your questions will be answered. And the ones that can't be answered, well, welcome to the new world, I guess. So as a way of introduction, I want to go over the rules of the meeting. I already mentioned to stay muted. We are going to take follow-up questions in the chat section of this Zoom call. I'm going to be honest with you, I've not really done a Zoom call on a phone, so I don't know how to do chat on a phone, but it's probably possible, I imagine. And on the computer, it's just at the bottom middle, it says chat. What we'd ask for questions, follow-up questions, is that once your question has been addressed, then ask the follow-up question. We prefer no follow-up questions before any answers have been given. So we want to go through the questions that have been submitted first and then post them. We'll go over the follow-up questions at the very end of the presentation. And of course, if they've been answered already, then we'll be okay. A lot of our questions do overlap. We tried to organize them a little bit, but I don't know how well that's going to go. And then also the only other rule is in the chat section, please be kind. We know that this information is not complete. It is very frustrating in many instances. If every single one of us could have our druthers, we would probably all walk away happy. But unfortunately, we don't get to control everything. So we just ask you to be patient and kind in the chat section if you do decide to leave a question, follow-up question. And we'll see what happens with our dog who wants to entertain you. So with all of that, we're going to start tonight with a few basic statements. The first one will be Mr. Sean Douglas, who is the president of the school board. And he's joined us this evening, not only as a school board member, but as a band parent. And he wanted to share a few things first. So Sean, take it away.
Thanks, Mark. As Mark said, I am president of the school board. I've been on the board for about 5 years. I've been president for the last 3 years. And I just wanted to say on behalf of the school board, we realize how important band is. It's our largest group activity that we have, especially at the high school, most amount of students involved in any one particular activity. And we realize how important it is. As Mark said, I'm a band parent. My son Gavin is going to be a junior, and he plays tuba, and he's very much looking forward to playing this year. And we want to watch him, and we're looking forward to going to football games and seeing how well he can do this year along with all of your students. So I just wanted to say a brief welcome. I don't want to take up too much time because folks want to get to their questions for Mr. Tom Cole and Mrs. Smith. So welcome, everybody.
Thank you so much, Sean. We appreciate that. And now to kind of help us understand a little bit of the current academic planning struggle, AKA why we can't have all the answers right this second. Mrs. Angela Smith, our superintendent, would like to share some words with you. Mrs. Smith.
Thank you, Mark. As I've talked to several of you in the last few days, this is one of the most challenging times in my entire career in education. And I'm starting year 34. And if somebody would have told me on my first day of teaching I'd be leading a district during a pandemic 34 years ago, I don't know if I would have, stayed, because it is very, very challenging, and things are changing moment by moment. And one of the hardest groups, and I've had numerous conversations with numerous superintendents, with numerous staff members, one of the hardest groups to plan for are your band and choirs. If you are unaware, back when this pandemic all started, choirs are where they had some of the most rapid spread. Somebody had the virus and it spread amongst those large groups of people. And part of that is because of what is called, and trust me, I've learned more medical terminology in the last several weeks than I'd ever wanted to know, respiratory particle projection. And both band and choir do a lot of spraying of respiratory particles into the air. And what we know now over the last several months is that while surfaces are still a part of it, it's more what happens in the air that causes the spread of COVID-19. So as we're planning to do these return to school and those types of things, it's a lot easier to plan for a class of 15 to 18 students to be socially distant and be able to participate in the class with masks on than it is to plan for these large group organizations that need a variety of instrumentation, that have a variety of needs. Those groups are a little bit harder to plan for. And in the guidance, they didn't give us much guidance. They said arts are important. And I agree with Sean, arts are very, very important. And they are the lifeblood of school for so many students. And I understand that. And we will have arts in some way, shape, or form. I think it's just going to be different than what many of us have come to realize it to be or expect in the last several years. We have over 171 students, I think, signed up for band right now. And I can tell you with 100% certainty, in our band room, I can't socially distance 171 students. Can't do it. So we have to get creative within the guidelines, within approval of a plan with the Lake County General Health District, because they have to give their blessing to us as to what that plan would look like. And we are doing our best to figure out what it will be and how it will be. And in some of the questions that we've gotten, well, if my student decides to do online classes at home, why can't they still do band? Well, part of it is, and this did come to me as I was sitting here tonight, is that we're only going to have so many offerings and so many teachers for remote online learning. Our remote learning platform is going to be where a student will be in a dedicated remote class. It's not going to be a mix of a teacher trying to supervise their classroom and then students coming into the classroom. That's not a good scenario for anybody. So what will happen is students that are in remote learning at the high school will have a set schedule of core courses that are on the block and the option of a couple of electives. And we're still trying to work out what those electives will be, and part of that is the numbers. So if I have to offer certain sections when band happens, I don't have that flexibility in the schedule. So we're trying to come up with options for students that want to stay musically connected to be able to do it remotely. It would not include, you know, that face-to-face interaction, and I know that there's so many students that want that. But trying to meet the needs of everybody is just an undaunting and unmanageable and impossible task right now, as much as I would like to do that. So that's, and things are constantly changing. On Thursday, the chances of Lake County going to level 3 or red, those chances have increased greatly. Lake County Health Commissioner, because I'm on meetings now, well, we have had 2 meetings in the last week already, and we'll have another one on Thursday, has said that he fully anticipates Lake County going into the red. And then that's going to scale back the level of what things we can and cannot do. So this is a moving target. As much as I'd like to say I'd have it all figured out for parents to make a decision by Friday, you're going to have to make the decisions that are best for your family and what you feel you can do to minimize your family's risk. Because in every meeting I've been in with the health directors, they say it's the level of risk people want to assume when they do things. And band and choir are up there at the highest levels of risk. I'm just going to, tell you that. I can't sugarcoat that any other way. They truly are at the highest levels of risk. And I know that many of you want to take that risk, and we're going to find the ways that we can do it as safely as possible, if we can. But there's no guarantees as of right now. I don't want anybody to walk away from this meeting saying that band and choir are a 100% certainty, because they aren't.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Yes, the odds don't seem to be in our favor very much. I do want to say, as a parent, I don't work for the district. I'm a volunteer and a parent like pretty much almost everybody in this room. I have kids in the school district. This has been hard, not going to lie. It's been really hard. And there's a lot of pain. And making these decisions that are best for our family is the hardest thing to do. So I have talked to Mrs. Smith and to Mr. Tomko quite a bit over the last few weeks. And I know beyond the shadow of a doubt that they feel your pain. I want to assure you that nobody is getting any joy out of any of the decisions that are difficult or don't work the best that they can. So just be patient if you can. One of the things that would help before we get to the question and answer is what we're doing, what the plan looks like. This is not published, nor is it published in any other school district. In fact, this meeting is quite frankly a blessing to me that you guys were willing to do this, Mr. Tomko and Mrs. Smith. Certainly some schools have some information out about band camp because their band camps have started sooner. Ours is being pushed back a little bit, but with all of that said, Mr. Tomko has been willing to give us here an outline of what band may look like if we're given the opportunity. So without further ado, Mr. Tomko, would you please fill us in on your outline of what we may or may not get to do?
I will be happy to. But with that being said, this is not fun information. This isn't fun to write up. I don't like any of this. This is not the way I wanted this year to go, nor did any of us. So here we go. We've been putting together plans and contingencies and not sleeping and trying to figure this out. And all this information is obviously still in progress. And as we've said, I don't know how many times before, it will change. So first, before I go into what we're doing, I did want to address anything you might have seen from other districts in the area. I've been in constant contact with other directors in the area of similar program sizes, bigger and smaller. And what works for one school might not work for others just because of numbers of students, numbers of directors, which is a big thing, and rehearsal spaces. So, like I said, what works for one might not work for us or all. So there's no doubt that it will look different, but this is kind of where we're at. And my first priority is keeping everybody safe while they're in band in any capacity. So in a best case scenario, knowing what we have, this is where we're at. Based on guidance from the health department, we are allowed to gather in no larger than 50. So that means band would be divided up into smaller bands of no larger than 50 kids. Instrumentation and personnel would be determined by the directors and would not be up for reconsideration. Depending on our numbers, the way it's looking now, and how you choose to go, we would be either between 3 and 4 bands. Summer band activity, it's even hard to call it band camp because it'll look so different, but band camp days would be broken into 2 rehearsal sessions. There'd be one in the morning and one in the afternoon. Those would be of different bands. There would be sufficient time between bands for students to leave, the room be disinfected, and the next group to enter. So it wouldn't be band every day for every student. There would be a schedule. All students will obviously remain 6 feet apart at all times, and there will be very strict rules on things like masks, trip to the bathroom, instrument storage, water, and instruments who need to empty their spit valves. I know we joke about that a lot, but this is a real issue. So there are, we have some guidelines written out, and I'm not going to get into them right now, but they are strict, and they are pretty, they're just strict. So moving on to football. Now, if we're assuming football is going to be played, and we assume that there are going to be fans in the stands, each band would only play at getting ahead of myself. We will only play at home games. All other performances, including Cedar Point, Solon Band Bash, and Grape Jamboree, have already been canceled. And they've been canceled on our end. On their end. All right. Football. Each band would play at 1 game, with the seniors playing at 2. We wear summer uniforms all season, and we would adjust the uniform as the weather gets cold. We will have 1 drum major and no majorettes for the season. When the band's game is done, we would transition directly into concert band. There would be no concert band auditions, and the band you are placed in is the band that you will stay. If you are wanting to play an instrument but opt for online instruction, we're looking at an option where you'd be able to come in to the school 1 period a day and participate in an ensemble type class. This would be something different than regular band that performed at football games. If you opt for this, there'd be no marching band or athletic component. And like I said before, that particular one would not perform at football games. The idea of that band would be to keep distant from the rest of the school population, as if you opt for home, to keep your kids safe. All right. Because of logistical reasons, how we would have to break up into different bands for a school day, and lots of options that we're looking at, we would have to utilize the entirety of the 4th block during the day. We would also have to repurpose space in the band room to spread out instrument storage. So because of all those reasons, there will be no jazz band for at least the first semester. All of this will be reevaluated as guidance changes and as things happen, and hopefully we can relax things second semester. But, as federal, state, and local authorities change things, we have to be fluid with that. So this is kind of what band would look like for the coming year. I know these are not really great things to hear, and trust me, they're things I don't like saying, but to have some kind of band and keep everybody safe, that's a little outline of the plan.
Thank you, Mr. Tomko. I know some of you are thinking, well, why didn't he say that in the first place? Then I wouldn't have had my questions, because many of your questions were just answered. Not all, but many. Well, the reason is because what Mr. Tomko mentioned and Mrs. Smith mentioned, that cannot get enough play, in my opinion. We don't know if there's going to be in-person school at all. So far there is. We don't know if there's going to be football. We don't know if there's going to be marching. And I'm talking statewide. So thank God for people like Mr. Tomko and our school board and Mrs. Smith and all the teachers who are working so diligently to come up with a plan they may not get to enact. So thank you, Mr. Tomko, for that. We're going to dive into some questions now. Most of the questions will be directed at either Mrs. Smith or Mr. Tomko. We've also invited Mr. Douglas and, of course, Mr. Bull. You're welcome to pop in and feel free, Mrs. Smith, Mr. Tomko, just interrupt each other if you have something to add or whatever. These can be a fluid conversation among the 4 of you, depending on the insight that you guys have. But we're looking for answers from different people. So the first one is in a section of questions we've taken and collated, a section of questions I'm calling questions about remote learning band options. Now, many of these questions will already have been answered, and if so, we'll just skip them. So for Mrs. Smith, can students who choose to learn remotely still attend band class in person with a dedicated classroom and closely located external doors? This could be done without coming in contact with the rest of the school. That's a lot of details, but bottom line, Mr. Tomko just talked about it a little bit, but are we comfortable with that separate class?
If we can make that work in the schedule, that group would be put together as that remote learning band group. Like I said, the difference between remote learning and the CCP group, CCP, they're scheduling around band. Unfortunately, with all the variables and moving parts here, we can't schedule around band for the remote learning options, because I have to know where the numbers are and then schedule the cores first. And that's a little different, because if you know anything about building the master schedule, usually when your normal time of year and you're building a master schedule, you're going to block out the band first. So all the kids flow into band and then build your other sections. But with this unique situation we're in, I have to make sure that I have enough of the online required learning with the graduation requirements done first.
Thank you.
I'll add to that just real quick about that class. If that was something you were to opt to, that class would look very different. And it would depend on who's in it, instrumentation wise, and what we would work on. So that could be a little bit of a hybrid kind of class, band, small group, some music theory, things of that nature. So it would be band, but it would certainly look a little different depending on who's in the class.
Thank you. Mrs. Smith, you mentioned this briefly, but will CCP students still be allowed to take some classes in person at the high school as well as at the college that they're going to? Specifically, will CCP students be allowed to return for band?
As of right now, they can do that. And again, that's because they've scheduled around it as they're picking their classes. Plus, parents aren't keeping them choosing to be home for the remote learning option for the health and wellness and safety of their students. Now, if they're doing all online and they're scheduling around that, there's just so many variables, Mark.
Yeah.
I wish we had the right answers and what the law says about CCP students, because they can do that. They can schedule that for band.
Okay. Thank you for that. So that one's going to be a little confusing, so we're going to need to play that by ear. Just a reminder, if you're doing the virtual or the online version for school, for Madison High School, you are taking less risk by keeping your student at home. CCP students may be taking classes at Lakeland or any other local college, so they're assuming more risk than you would be if you're going to do the virtual thing online. At least that's the assumption. Okay, let's see. Mr. Tomko, if a student does decide to do remote learning upon returning from remote learning, either next semester or next year, will he or she be able to join band again?
Everybody is welcome, no matter when. That should be simple. So if you decide to stay online and don't even want to mess with the band class, and then we're back in January, great. Or even next year, whenever it is, there's no re-audition, there's no requirements like that.
Fantastic. Let's see here. Mrs. Smith, if a student is planning to attend school with one of the accredited online schools like the Ohio Virtual Academy and others, can they still participate in band?
No, because they're actually a student registered in another school.
Correct. And that has historically been the case. There's been no exceptions.
Correct.
Right. Okay, thank you. Mr. Tomko, oh, never mind. You already answered that one about an online band option. Okay, next section of questions is questions about marching season. Mr. Tomko, you mentioned a little bit of a flow or a schedule of the band camp days. If there is band camp, how long of a day will it be for the students?
Well, we talked about half days. We don't have anything specific written yet. I can tell you they would be shorter rehearsals than a typical band camp morning, probably in the range of a couple hours. And as we write the schedule, we would certainly work on those things. You know, you think about a regular band camp year, we have long rehearsals after having instruments off faces for 6 weeks at most. And now we're talking about putting instruments back on faces after months. So there'll be a little bit of a ramp up, but certainly.
Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Tomko. I am certain you're wrong. Every one of these students represented by these parents have been playing all summer, every day. I'm certain of it. I just believe it.
Well, that makes one of you. And I'm not worried about it. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. So this next question probably is answered by that one, but just to reiterate, are students bringing their lunches? And if again, where are they eating them? And where will they be stored?
We will shift it so that there will not be any eating at the school. So everyone will bring in their own water, and sorry, I lost my train of thought. If there's no, there'll be morning and afternoon. So you'd either eat after it's over or before you go. So there would be no lunches at the school.
Okay. And then really the next question is, what are you doing about drinks? I think everyone whose student has been to band camp, or if you volunteered at band camp, you have that image in your mind of parents with plastic gloves on, dipping their hands in large buckets of Gatorade and water. So what's the plan for drinks? You just mentioned it, but if you wouldn't mind reiterating.
Sorry, I got flipped to the next question. Yeah, everyone would be responsible for their own water bottles, and depending on how we are and where we can access to refill those, but there will be no handing out of water or sharing anything, really.
Very good. Next question, Mr. Tomko, how will the uniforms be fitted, cleaned, and handled safely?
Everything will be done at home individually, since we'll be doing summer uniforms as long as we can. And then if we get later enough into the season and it gets cold, we can issue raincoats that can go home and be washed at home. So everything will be done, and nothing will, let's say, cross-contaminate.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Tomko, during band camp, and I think this is a fair question, at least for me as a parent, how will students be held accountable to social distancing, hand washing, mask, and other health guidelines?
Well, those are still things that we are working on. There will be certainly a flow within the band room of which doors to enter and exit, and how even to walk into the band setup where your instruments will be stored, and having rules and times for bathroom usage, and even things like that. So where we're not congregating in any areas. So I foresee a lot of arrows on the floor, but there will certainly be a lot of pre-prep to the setup.
Very good. I'm relatively certain I know the answer to these next two questions, but Mrs. Smith, will parents be able to attend the football games to watch the games and the member of the band?
We are not sure yet. Don't know. We've gotten absolutely no guidance on contact fall sports. We are waiting for that guidance and the large group gatherings that would ensue, because right now, if we go red, I don't know how you bring people together in large group gatherings. So that is something to be determined. I wish I had.
Yeah, and the second question in that same vein, you're going to have a similar answer, I imagine. Can a definitive decision regarding the marching season be made this week?
Absolutely not. Because we haven't gotten any of the guidance on if the league is even going to have football games. I mean, those are some things that we're talking about as a league. And if Lake County goes red, and there's 2 schools in our league that are already in a red county, soon to be possibly level 4 or purple, Mayfield and Brush, that adds some complexity. So there are so many parts. I can't tell you how many meetings I'm in on any given day or phone conversations regarding the what ifs.
Makes sense. The next section of questions I labeled questions about band in the classroom. So Mr. Tomko, if a student plays an instrument that spit needs to be emptied, how is that going to be handled safely? I know you kind of mentioned that. Would you mind kind of expounding upon some of your ideas?
A little bit of that, based on guidance that came out about music and instrumental playing in particular, is where I'm getting a lot of my guidance from this. And so instruments that would need to relieve their spit valves would have to have their own rag that they take with them, either store in their case, plastic bag, if you want to bring something disposable, such as a puppy pad or something like that. But every student would be responsible for their own. And so kids wouldn't be getting up and walking through other kids throughout the rehearsal. So basically, once everyone gets to their seat, they're there and they have everything they need. And then we, no getting up and using the garbage can or anything like that.
Very good. The next question is about jazz band, but you mentioned to make space for the act to have band at all. There wouldn't be able to be jazz band at least the first semester. And then here's a question for Mr. Tomko. How will students stay socially distant in the band room?
Everything will be in at least 6 foot markings. So everything will be marked on the floor. Like I said, we'll have flows coming in and out. We'll put brass instrument storage in one room and woodwinds in the jazz band setup. And that's for regular classroom use. During band camp, everything has to go with everybody every day. So we can dismiss and we can do things in large groups. We won't be congregating outside in the hallways, in bathroom breaks. There won't be mass breaks like that. So that's something we're still working out the fine details of, but we have some ideas certainly moving forward.
Thank you. The next section of questions is COVID-related questions. Mrs. Smith, if a student is exposed to COVID-19 from a family member, like their mother or their brother or sister got COVID, is a 14-day quarantine from the date of the family member's diagnosis adequate before they could return back to band? Or would there need to be a longer period since they may not contract it until later?
Right now, I'm on the guidance of the health department and medical advisors, and they say a 14-day quarantine period from when the family member contracted it. So
Okay.
for that first exposure. But again, we're working on all of those details as we go forward because we're learning. And I don't want anybody to get COVID.
Me neither.
I don't want anyone in any of our programs. And I know that there have been other districts that have already faced it in their sports programs, and they've had to quarantine teams for 14 days so they can't come back and practice and all of those things. So we're going to be real careful and probably err on the side of most caution as students are exposed to the virus.
Thank you. And a follow-up question to that. What will happen if a band student who is present in the room tests positive for COVID? Will the rest of that particular band be informed? Will they be part of a contact tracing procedure?
And that's one of the reasons why we have to keep it together. Yes, there will be contact tracing through the Lake County General Health District. They will run that investigation. They are the experts in how to do it. They will be the ones helping to share that information in all the legal ways.
Thank you. The next section of questions has one question, and it was about seniors. Mr. Tomko, is there a way to find something special to do with all the seniors as a group, even if they choose to learn online, whether it be a virtual performance or something outdoors? Is there any way to do something special with our seniors musically?
I would certainly hope so. I think as we get closer and as we see what we can actually do, I think there will be definitely something throughout the year we'll be able to do. We just don't know what that looks like yet. So I'm hoping we can think outside the box if we certainly can't get back together. But I guess the short answer is yes. We will
Thank
do
you
something.
for that. As a parent who's slowly coming to the realization that his daughter is a senior and doesn't like it one bit, it's nice to know that there may be something, some little nugget of nice. Thank you for considering it. And then I had one question about parents and volunteers, since obviously the original documentation that came out from the district said that there won't be allowed to be parent volunteers on campus. But this question is, if parents are not allowed, and this is from Mr. Tomko, if parents are not allowed to be there, will someone be taking any pictures or videos of the kids this year?
I will say this. As of right now, there are no volunteers of any kind going to be doing anything. We'll have to see as things get closer. But I will tell you, if there are not fans in the stands, we're not going to be playing to an empty. We're not going to be playing to an empty stadium, because we know, and I know, and I love it, that you guys would all show up and be around the outside of the fence anyway. And that is that's not the point what we're trying to do here. So I would say, as far as volunteers, right now the answer is no, there won't be anything. And we'll just have to wait and see as we get closer to what we're allowed to do.
Thank you. And then the last section of questions I have, I put in a category called questions about if nothing works. So Mr. Tomko, if there isn't a football season, what will that mean for marching band? What will the class look like?
If there's no football season and we are still able to have band and meet like that, it will be concert band all year. I don't know what else to say about that. It's unfortunate. It's not what I would want. And I know it's what most kids would not want, but if that's the hand we're dealt in order to even have a group, that's what we would have to do.
Yeah. Now, let me just ask this one question to Mrs. Smith and Mr. Tomko. It's just a follow-up to that, of course, as a parent, my heart's breaking over all of this stuff too. Obviously, as things change. So, for example, let's say this new this new vaccine that's being tested works out well, and by spring we're feeling safer. I'm not saying that we go back and do another football season or whatever, but are you willing, Mr. Tomko and Mrs. Smith, to allow Mr. Tomko to be creative, to come up with other experiences for the kids? I don't know what that might be, but are we willing to be creative, I guess, over the course of the year?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I think, without a doubt, I live for Friday nights in the band and watching the football team and watching the band, get the football team on the field and all the things of a school career. I mean, since I was 5 years old, school's been a part of my life. And the majority of my life has been in secondary ed, career. And I love everything about a high school experience. And it breaks my heart that we're doing the things that we're doing. But we have to do them for the safety of our students and families and to get through this crazy, crazy time that we're in. And I appreciate everybody's patience and support as we delve into these things, because I want to be able to celebrate this senior class in some way as well.
Thank you.
That needs to go beyond, it needs to carry over into everything we do this year. It's going to be a challenging year, however it ends up looking, and finding ways to have special moments. We may have to pass on some of our traditions, but we may have to come up with some cool other things that students get to experience. And hopefully they leave here, knowing that they weathered COVID and that they got to do some different kinds of things to celebrate their year. I really think it needs to go into every classroom and every experience that they have.
Thank you. I appreciate the willingness to consider that. And then the final official question that's already been submitted, I would say for Mr. Tomko and Mrs. Smith both, if we do not end up going to school in person in the fall at all, if we end up having to start all of us online, will there still be some sort of an offering for band?
Well, As we found out in the spring, doing band online is certainly difficult from both ends. So we'll have to do a wait and see on just how the year is going to start. And I think that might have a lot of impact on how things look. But I don't know, Mrs. Smith, if you have anything to add to that might be a little more black and white, but that's a tough one.
That is a tough one. I think you and I talked about some things in conversation today. We're going to start in the next week building that schedule based on what we've learned from the surveys, the commitments that we have gotten online for the remote learning, and then looking at the students that will be in our buildings. And that's going to take a little bit of time to build those schedules. But the idea is, if we end up at any point with remote learning, those students in the remote learning, their schedule is their schedule. The students that have been coming to the building, their schedule is their schedule. So a teacher, and I saw this in the chat, will be teaching a mix of, at middle and high school, they'll be teaching a mix of in-person classes, so they could have 4 or 5 classes with students that are scheduled to be in person, and they could have a section of remote learning. And the same with the high school. They could have a block, 2 blocks of students that they teach in person and 1 block of remote learning. And that is really all numbers dependent, which is why somebody asked about band, and it's based on how much staff we have available to teach what we need to teach. And that's in any given year.
So there's going to have to be some flexibility, essentially, is what it comes down to. We're going to have to figure it out. Okay.
Yep.
All right, so those are all the questions that had been submitted in advance. If you didn't hear your question specifically, it's because a lot of questions were very similar, and so Jennifer and I just kind of reworded them and put them together. If you still have questions that haven't been answered, spend the next 2 or 3 minutes making sure to get those in the chat section so we can go through them. There are a few already in there as follow-ups. We're doing pretty good. It's 7:47. I'm hoping to be done by 8, so let's see if we can plow through some of these.
While we're waiting to plow through some of these questions, because this one came up, this has come up a couple times in other places. If you did not get the survey or the link to the survey, we sent it out in the letter that we send out via Infinite Campus. And if you haven't updated with the correct email address or have an email address in there, then that's chances are you did not get those communications. I have been communicating pretty strongly since March through Infinite Campus, sending out regular updates. So you need to make sure your information is accurate in Infinite Campus to get those updates. We also publish them on the web page, so the link is on the web page.
I did see.
Oh, go ahead.
I just saw a question as I was kind of flipping through the chat just real quick about concert band and concerts. And I can answer that real quick. We aren't going to, at least for right now, going to be able to do the in-person concerts. We have to get creative with that. Either the kids will do some kind of virtual concert where we record it over, YouTube Live or Facebook, something like that, or we just record. We record and put out a concert at some point. So we'll have to be creative, and those are just a couple things. But basically, large gatherings as concerts, we can't afford to do.
Thank you. Okay, I guess this one would probably be for Mrs. Smith or Mr. Douglas. If Lake County moves to level 3, does that mean school will then move to an online solution and therefore band online? So I guess, is that a foregone conclusion? If we're red, we're going online, or is that up in the air still?
That is still a conversation that we are having with the Lake County Health Director, other superintendents in the region. So there is no definitive answer yet on what, if we go red, it will look like. We hope to be making those decisions, soon. It's been a conversation, like I said, we've been having in the region. Many of the districts feel that if we go red, we would be better off to start online, to start with remote learning for the safety of the students and the level of risk. Again, as I was hearing it in a meeting today, when there's more community spread, the level of risk for spreading goes up. So it is something that everybody's looking at and taking into consideration and having conversations about. But at this point, we don't have a definitive decision. Level 4 is a foregone conclusion, I think, with everybody. If we get to level 4, we'll be home.
If the governor shows you anything in purple, don't need to put clothes on. You could stay in your PJs for your kids. All right, Mrs. Smith, is the inflexibility of the schedule due to teachers teaching both online and face-to-face classes? Or what is can you describe a little bit the struggle of the schedule a little bit better?
And I think I've touched on this a couple times, but I will again. When you're building a schedule, you have to look at all the course requests. Band is a big block of students. So usually what happens is in a typical year, you'll schedule band and you'll block out all your band students. So then they start to fill in all the other courses as they're building that schedule in the schedule wizard is what it's called. This year, we have multiple challenges, but it depends on the number of students that opt to do remote learning. How many sections of English 9 I would have totally remote. English 10, 11, and 12. Based on the numbers right now, I have enough for about one class in each of those grade levels for required courses. So those courses could typically get scheduled first, and they would need to be. Those core classes, because I've got to block those teachers out of the schedule now for remote learning. And then it may or may not fit with the band schedule. So it's a big puzzle that's even made more complicated by COVID-19.
Thank you for that explanation. So one parent said that there have been many students that are OHVA or Ohio Virtual Academy students, but have participated in choir and show choir and drama. They said that one of them was a streak of the week. So is that true?
I would really have to check into that. My understanding is we do have students that go to other schools that are sponsored and chartered within our jurisdiction, so they can participate in activities. We have students that are homeschooled that are allowed to participate in our activities. But if they are registered to another public school district, they cannot participate in our activities. And so Ohio Virtual Learning Academy is their own school district. I don't know if something's happened that I didn't see, but usually those things kick out. So I would have to look at it.
Okay. So this question, I don't think it was actually addressed. Can you repeat what you said about open enrolled students and band? I don't think we talked about open enrolled. I don't know how would it affect open enrolled students?
Open enrolled students have the same options as our students in Madison if they want to do virtual, remote learning for the year, or if they want to do in-person learning for the year. So that really is not an impact.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Tomko, would bands be marching at football games or just like a pep band thing?
That's still to be determined. If there is marching, there won't be much. It will be mainly a pep band, but that will still have to be determined by what we're allowed to do. You know, even at a group of 50 at 6 foot distance, which is 4 steps, by the way, for marching fans. But even at that spacing, 50 people just to get them in the stadium at distance is not a concern, but a challenge. So still to be determined.
Okay. Will temperatures be taken daily? Oh, is that about band? That might have been about band camp.
Okay. I'm going to say yes. We don't have we don't have anything for that yet, but that is on my list to figure out how to do. And I think that's something we need to do. So I'm going to just say yes.
Follow-up question. Will the school district buy that, or do you need the band patrons officers to vote to buy you some thermometers? We can talk about that later. Okay. We already answered the online. Okay. What about percussion for band camp? Not really able to take instruments home. Yeah, because you said the instruments would come home for the summer days.
Those, I'm sorry, yes, I understand what you're saying. Large instruments can stay at school. Yes, okay. Percussion tubas, they will have a spot.
Oh, yeah. I mean, will there be someone to clean the mallets and the sticks and things, or?
Those will be individual and will go home. Everyone will have their own.
Okay, they'll be responsible for their own. Okay, very good. All right. Are the guidelines for the number of days students can miss going to change if they test? Oh, you know what? I meant to say this earlier in the rules. We're not really answering whole school questions. This is just band related, but Mrs. Smith, do you want to say anything about that, or want to hold on?
Some of these, I can answer some of these. They just sent out over the weekend a whole attendance, what's going to count and how it's going to count. And I haven't had an opportunity to read it yet with all the other things I've been preparing for, but I am certain that they're not going to hold kids truant if they're out because of COVID-19. You know, there is going to be some, I'm sure, flexibility.
Okay. We already answered the question about concerts. What happens with the physical education waiver for band students? Is that still available to band students?
Good question. I'm going to have to get that answered by the Ohio Department of Education and see what their answer is to us.
Okay. Can you imagine if Sydney has to take PE this year? I'm teasing. I'm totally teasing. Okay. Let's see. Was there something sent out for parents to indicate their child will be doing in-person school? Oh, you already did that. Okay. Got it. When will freshman parents get summer uniform shirts?
That's still to be determined, since we have not done any of our typical fittings or anything like that. We will come up with something. Okay.
Yeah, we may have to do shirts a little different because of all the volunteers that it takes in the Streak Shack to make them, which aren't allowed. But there are ways to do shirts if we need to.
You got it. We'll figure it out.
Okay. If when Lake County goes red and the decision is made to go online, would that be for a semester at a time, or would the decision fluctuate with the level?
It will not necessarily be for the semester, but one of the comments I have made in multiple meetings with my colleagues is we cannot go red one week, orange have school, go back to red. There has to be some consistency in that plan. It's just not good for the students to have that uncertainty where I'm going to be. So we are discussing what that would look like if we started on red. How long, if there were a change, would we stay on remote learning, those types of things. Those are some of the conversations that we're having right now.
Thank you. Mr. Tomko, will there be a freshman orientation this year, or is the first day of school orientation? Oh, that's for Mrs. Smith?
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking, I thought you were talking about the new band parent meeting. Sorry about that, Mrs. Smith.
The plan for the first week of school is a lot different than normal first weeks of school. We have our opening day with the teachers on the 17th. We're going to have a professional development day with them on the 18th. And then the 19th, 20th, and 21st, those 3 days are welcome back days. So we're going to have smaller groups of students in the buildings looking at some of the training and understanding of what has to happen in order to be safe in school regarding social distancing and some of the changes that they're going to experience throughout their day. There will not be a freshman orientation the way we typically do it. So freshmen will be the only students in the building on that Friday. And they will have, that will be their orientation day. That's where they will learn all the things that they would learn during that usual freshman orientation they have at the high school, walk their schedule, get adjusted. We know that this is a big change, and it's not the way we like to do things because we want the parents involved. But again, the more people we bring in, the greater the risk of spread.
Thank you. A few more. If a child travels out of state during the school year, will they be required to quarantine for a specific time?
We are looking at right now what the guidance says. Right now, anybody can travel anywhere and there's no quarantine restriction. I have a feeling, based on things the governor alluded to over the weekend, that he's going to be issuing some more orders and there might be a travel restriction. So we will have to see. I mean, good judgment is if you go to a hot spot, I would, strongly suggest that you don't come to school until you know you're COVID free, But again, those are things that's something the health department, the governor's office, those people have to weigh in on.
Thank you. This question, what do we select in the survey? I assume that means the survey for choosing whether your child will, or maybe this is the band survey, I don't know. What do we select in the survey for CCP with the intention to do band in school? Maybe that's the band survey.
If it's the band survey, that's just for my own to know numbers. So just choose in school, and so that way I know you're there.
CCP would be considered in school anyway, in general, correct?
Yes, I don't know what for the other survey, but for mine, if that's what you're looking at, that's just in school.
Okay. I hope that answered that question. And then also, you mentioned fourth block for band. What time is fourth block?
Fourth block is the time band has always been. It starts about 1:30. It's at the end of the day. So again, we'll have to work out schedules and how it would all work. But yeah, fourth block is always at the end of the day. I think bell rings at 1:25, something like that. So.
Thank you. And this looks like the last question. So Mrs. Smith, can you clarify, can students who choose to do online school participate in athletics?
And I want to be clear, there is a distinction between band, because it is a part of the curricular program, and our athletic program. And as of right now, we have not said that students who do online could not participate in athletics. That is still an option. But again, we're looking at all scenarios in all cases. There are some districts that have limited that and said if you don't come to school, you don't participate.
Thank you for that. And then I guess last one, for real last one, if anyone posts after this, we're not answering it because it's already after 8. Will we get schedules in advance prior to the welcome back week?
That would be our goal, which is why we have the July 24th deadline, so that our principals can then take all this data and start building the schedules.
Very good. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. Thank you, Mr. Tomko, Mrs. Smith, Mr. Bull, Mr. Douglas, for joining us and giving us such quality answers. We have recorded this session. It's going to probably take a few hours, but at some point we will make this recording from the Zoom conversation available online for those who missed this, as well as to refer back to if you knew you heard the answer to a question but couldn't remember what the answer was. So with all of that said, thank you all for joining us. I am going to close out our session now, and have a great rest of the evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.